Okay, so my hair ended up in these two little buns, and usually I do feel the space bun thing, but today I just hadn't washed my hair in a few days and didn't feel like washing it today either, and so it ended up like this, but now I feel like I look like a Star Trek character. Also, I'm still sick, my dear cult members. Do you remember? I've been sick for so long. Yes, I'm on antibiotics now, but like, oh my god, I'm over it. It's about to be October on Sunday. Like, enough. Nothing could keep me from being in a good mood today, though. Not even that. Because for one thing, Saw X was good, and for another, I hit 25,000 subscribers on this channel. Excuse me, not subscribers, cult members. Yes, if you're new here, I do run my own online virtual cult. Yes, if you too would like to join the cult of Haunted Hippie, it is the easiest one to join in the entire world. All you have to do is click subscribe. And then, you know, if you want to get in good with the old Spawn of Satan here, or the Duchess of Darkness, whatever you want to call me, then you would also click the like button and the notification bell. That way you never miss our next gathering. 3.5 years to get to this point. It's pretty unreal, and so I'm so thankful that I am celebrating with a good review of a new horror movie this year. Been a dry year of horror, so I'm super excited to talk about Saw X. Today's video will be completely unscripted, and if you're new here, typically most of my videos have been very scripted the last few years, but since I did my Roast of the Nun 2 and I've kind of returned to form and have been making a lot more chaotic unscripted stuff, the people have enjoyed that. So that's what we're doing today. Maybe I will start to dissociate, maybe I will lose my train of thought. That's fine. I'm ready to roll those dice. You wouldn't believe how many minutes of footage I have to cut out of me literally just like staring off, or I'll just start singing a song. So let's cross our fingers that doesn't happen today, but no promises. I'm speaking to myself because I'm the one that has to edit it, but anyway. So Saw X, if you are new to this franchise, or if you're not, then I think that you will actually enjoy this movie. I'm gonna get into all my spoiler-free thoughts. I feel like most of this review will end up being spoiler-free, but of course I will warn you whenever I start getting into spoiler territory. In my spoiler-free section, I will be sticking to kind of all the stuff that was in the marketing, but I won't be getting into like a detailed synopsis or anything, because I actually never even watched the trailer for the movie, and I'm so glad that I didn't. I also do want to talk about some of the other reception to this movie, and I don't know, should I start with that? Nah, yeah, maybe. So, where to begin? I think, you know what, I think I do want to start with the critical reception to the movie because it's just so absurd, and I'm gonna keep you on the hook a little bit longer before I get into my thoughts. As I'm perusing the internet right now, I am seeing multiple articles with Saw X torture porn in the same title. The Guardian is a website that I never recommend if you are looking to read any online horror reviews. Here's the title of the Guardian article: Saw X review, torture porn horror returns with more blood, less value. While financial greed is the obvious studio motivator, cheaply made horror is still the most reliably profitable genre in Hollywood. It's curious to ponder why we might want to endure another 2 hours of stomach-churning gore, especially when served on such a musty old platter. You know what? Fuck you, Benjamin Lee. I am so tired of people who don't like horror reviewing horror movies, because it's so obvious that they come in with this bias and then it completely blocks them from like being receptive to all the nuance and the emotion of the film. And then the Variety article is the one that went a little bit viral on horror Twitter, where everyone was just like, dude, shut the fuck up. Saw X review, Tobin Bell dominates a torture porn sequel that comes closer to being a real movie. That might be a good thing or not. The Saw films have always been rightfully tagged as torture porn, but they come on as flesh-ripping morality plays. I also find it really weird when he goes on to say, we're making the choice to watch this insane sadistic pulp and experience it as a kick. We're the torture porn addicts. I don't really believe that because I've never really been someone that's been super into body horror. I've gotten much more into it as my love of horror has developed and I've explored more subgenres and more decades. What gets me going is the practical effects, not so much the body horror, because it gives me that movie magic feeling of like, oh my god, how did they do this? But that's also not even why I watch Saw. If all of the gore and stuff was implied in Saw, I would still love the franchise, because I love the characters. I love these morality tests. I love that they are movies that get the gears turning. They make me think a lot. On the surface, it seems pretty simple, like you have to engage in these awful activities just to keep your own life. But it's always more than that because of the specific people that John chooses to put in his trap. traps. And then over the course of 10 movies, excluding Spiral, 9 movies, the way that John Kramer as a character has also developed, yeah, Saw X is definitely his deepest portrayal yet, and one that he so deserved, because Tobin Bell has obviously always been the star of this franchise alongside Amanda, but his screen time has never properly reflected that, because he has always been such a deep, complex character, but we haven't always gotten to see that. You see his influence and the depth of his character more so as it plays out through his traps and the people he chooses and the choices that they make. Also his ability to intuit what they're going to do in said traps and how pretty much everything always falls exactly into place. That of course gave us a really in-depth look into his psyche, but now he really gets the screen time to really show us himself. I loved it. And also, this feels weird to say, but I have never really felt like a lot of the Saw movies are horror films, because they always have that crime element to them. They feel a lot more like crime drama thrillers. And trust me, I'm the last person to split hairs on, oh, well, actually, that's a thriller. Well, actually, those people are very annoying to me. So I'm not one of those people. I will never tell you what is not a horror film in your own opinion, because for some people, rom-coms are horror movies. Like, maybe they're triggering for some people and it feels horrific. You know, who am I to tell you what is not a horror movie? So just for me and my own perception, the Saw movies don't really feel like horror. It's also really hard for me to explain this sentiment. It's just a feeling that I have deep in my being. But to me, a horror movie is something like Insidious, where the entire atmosphere of the entire movie never really lets up. There are so few nice moments of levity in that movie. It's kind of just unrelenting. And some of the Saw movies definitely are that way. They kind of never let up on the action and the gore and all that. Like how Seven is not really considered a horror movie by most people, but I do recognize that most of those people are maybe more fans of drama thrillers who don't have as much respect for horror. But Seven is a thriller. It's a crime thriller that just happens to also be really gory and gross. People throw a lot more respect on that because it's David Fincher, it's got Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt. And the Saw movies are not really that different. Like, I don't personally see much of a difference at all between Saw and Seven. I just think that crime thriller stuff kind of lives in a league of its own that's a little bit removed from horror. But of course, I do recognize that a lot of the Saw sequels kind of fell into the trap, if you will, of having kind of the main goal to titillate, right, and show off. It's all of that to say that I feel like Saw X is kind of getting back to the root of the franchise. Yes, Saw X is much more gory than the original movie, but it is also so much more centered in its drama and the character relationships. I think that for critics who don't love horror, don't watch a lot of horror, they like cannot separate that from the gore. If something has that type of gore, then they're like, oh, horror movie, torture porn, like that's it. That's the main point of the movie. When like the movie is almost 2 hours long and each victim is only in their trap for 3 minutes. So you do the math. We spend so much time on John Kramer's drama and his relationship with Amanda. It's really too bad that some critics are too squeamish to realize there's a good movie in front of them, but whatever. Staying on the topic of John and Amanda, if you watch the Saw movies because you love him as a villain, oh, this movie's gonna be such a treat. I mean, you probably already could understand that the way that I have been going on and on about how centric it is on John, but I really feel like this movie was made for the fans. It was directed by Kevin Grudert, who also directed Saw 6. He also directed Saw 7, and up until Saw 6, he also had edited the entire franchise. I feel like that put him in a really good position to be just so intimately familiar with all the material and with John as a character, and Amanda as well. And so, I mean, who better to kind of explore their relationship than him? It was also just such a raw take, because this is a movie where the characters are still alive, and if you're new to the franchise, I don't have time to explain the whole timeline right now, but it's really interesting that it takes place between Saw 1 and 2, because it gives the fans something new, like a little bit more context, we get deeper into those characters, but it also fits right in and just feels so realistic, you know what I mean? Also, thank God they didn't go back to form by choosing people to put in the traps that like stuck gum underneath underneath desks or something like that. Back in the early days of the Saw franchise, the people in the traps did not necessarily deserve it. It wasn't until Saw 6 and 7, Kevin Grudert, I mean, my man. I don't know how involved he is with the writing of it, but I mean, directing, obviously, he has a lot of influence on the day of, on the characters and stuff. But Saw 6, you know, they're trying to take down the privatized healthcare industry, and then Saw 7, you open on the first trap, and there's like a bunch of racists in them. And it's like, okay, these are the types of people that should be in the traps, and with Saw X, it's no different. It is such a cathartic movie. And for the vast majority of Saw fans that are pretty sympathetic towards John, you're really gonna like the framing of him in this movie and the framing of the people in the traps, because it just feels more right. That's why I think a lot of people are saying that this is the best movie since the original, which is also really interesting to me because I don't believe the original film is the best of the franchise. I would even rank it maybe a little bit more mid-tier, but the movie definitely is living up to the full potential of Saw. Now, the one caveat with that is that if you are a really big Saw fan, there are just some things about it that are gonna be really predictable. And I don't think that's really a fault of the movie, so I was just trying to meet the movie on its terms with like my rating and my review. If you're really familiar with the franchise, you just can expect certain beats and certain moments where there's gonna be a twist. That's just how this franchise rolls, and whether or not you could still be surprised by them at this point, I don't know, because for me, not really. But in a way, I didn't mind because they still manage to do things that we've never seen from this franchise before. Maybe I'll get into that when I start getting into spoilers and stuff, but there were two things in particular in this movie that I feel like I've never seen from this franchise before and genuinely were pretty shocking. And I'm not really talking about the traps per se, although the traps, oh, I haven't even talked about them yet. They were so good. They were so good and so mean-spirited, so much better than the dumb traps in Spiral. I know that some people that defend Spiral are like, well, yeah, the killer was super predictable and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and that's an understatement, babe. But the traps were good. And it's like, I don't know, in one of them you had a woman laying on a table and they were literally just pouring hot wax on her face. Yeah, real genius IQ it took to come up with that one. Like, what? Or being strung up and just having glass thrown at you. They're dumb, okay? Let's call it what it is. The traps in Saw X were so mean-spirited and they were so disgusting. I thought it was a really funny marketing ploy to bring back the barf bags for like festival screenings of Saw X. Oh, I just realized I'm not wearing my rings. Ugh. You would think, you know, 25,000 cult members and 3.5 years into this, I'm still forgetting my jewelry. Shit. God, and I hit my camera on my way out. What is this, amateur hour? I have my rings on now. But yes, the barf bags. I thought, oh, you know, cute. That's a very funny marketing strategy. But no, I genuinely think that for some festival goers that are seeing it maybe not at a horror festival, they legitimately might need those bags. Same thing with Triangle of Sadness that came out last year. I know that's not a horror movie, but they did the same thing with the marketing and with the festival screenings. There were barf bags. And I was like, that's weird. Like, this is just a drama, like it's a dark comedy, right? After watching that movie, fully understood. I was getting really queasy myself. And the same thing with Saw X. Like, I don't know what it was about this movie. I have seen the entire franchise more than once. I am quite familiar with most of the traps. I love the practical effects. It was something about Saw X and maybe the realism of the blood or something. I don't know. Don't be worried about corny looking light colored blood because we do kind of have that problem in Saw 3D and probably a few of the other movies, but I can't remember which ones right now. In this one, it's not a problem at all. The blood that pumps out of these people's bodies, it is thick, it is oxidized, it is dark, it looks real, and it's also not just blood and it's not just muscles. They get into like deeper parts of the body. I don't want to spoil anything, but they take it to some places that I don't think any of the Saw traps have gone before. It was much more medical, and you will understand that once you see the setup of the movie after the first act, and that gets under my skin a lot more than most other things would. It doesn't really make sense because in Saw traps of the past, you know, they're ripping people's faces open and stuff like that, or they're like ripping people's scalps off, or, you know, just like really barbaric things like that. For whatever reason, medical things trip me out a lot more. There are moments where you are in a character's POV, and shouts out to the filmmaking of this and the direction because it was done so well. You are in a character's POV while they are going through, I I can't say specifically, but it's Saw, you know, you're in their POV while their body is being cut open in a way. And it's done so well. I found my own heart kind of racing. I felt like I was starting to have a bit of like shortness of breath. It was really stressing me out because I so felt like I was in this character's shoes. So if you're someone who also is all right with body horror, but any type of medical intervention really freaks you out, then this one will get ya. Now, the crusty dusty critics were right about one thing. I do think that Tobin Bell is the absolute standout of this movie, and right now I am in the middle of doing a bunch of research on the Saw franchise because I will be releasing a deep dive of the franchise in the coming weeks here. Watching his interviews and everything from the very beginning, he has always taken this character so seriously. He has always had so much respect for the writing of the franchise and has also kind of just revered his character and has loved getting deep into him. And that alone it just still baffles my mind. I'm not over the fact that critics have just boiled this franchise down to torture porn. Because the thing is, I don't even understand how back in the early 2000s this franchise got pigeonholed into that, because, I mean, look at the 1980s. Torture porn wasn't even in the vocabulary until the early 2000s, I think because of Saw. And I guess because specifically the traps are designed to elicit a lot of pain from human beings, I don't know. And maybe because the gore of the 80s was usually more creature focused or paranormal focused, like Hellraiser and The Blob, I don't know. I just don't see how in the year of our Antichrist, 2023, critics still cannot look past that and are still using that term. When this franchise has existed for 20 years and there is such a clear development of John Kramer as a character as he's played by Tobin Bell, who takes the character so seriously. And as he should. It's a very complex, amazing character. Not saying he's like an amazing person, because obviously what he does is pretty off the rails, but the writing is amazing. I know I'm being so repetitive. I just don't understand how people still think that things can be mutually exclusive like that. Like, oh, just because something is so gory doesn't mean it can't be a serious film too. A bunch of babies. That is my thesis statement, that these critics are just a bunch of babies. And Shawnee Smith, whether or not she carries the same respect for her character, she completely brought it. She was in no way phoning it in. The chemistry between her and John too is so interesting. It reminds me a little bit of like Hannibal and Will Graham, where, okay, with Hannibal and Will Graham, there's definitely something homoerotic going on, but because it never reaches that point, I'm gonna kind of compare them to Amanda and John Kramer. Where with her and John, obviously it's not romantic. It's not even really familial, I would say. It doesn't really seem like he's a father figure. Well, no, I mean, one could argue that. But what I see really is just two people that see each other on an absolute level. And maybe that dissolves a bit as we get into Saw 3. If you're familiar with the franchise, things kind of change in that respect. But at this point, between Saw 1 and Saw 2, they're two people that like see each other's souls. They are kind of soulmates in a way. Whereas a character like Hoffman, I think, is a bit more of a sadist, Amanda and John, their relationship is actually, dare I say, kind of pure. And as a fan of the two of them, I just personally don't feel like I could have asked for much more. Yeah, it was a bit predictable, but I think that's just more the fault of me being so intimately familiar with the franchise. I think for newcomers, it's gonna be amazing. It'll rock your socks off. I think for Saw fans, you'll be a lot like me and kind of get exactly what you're looking for. Unless you're the type of Saw fan that the predictability is kind of gonna ruin it for you, then maybe not. One thing that I did not predict though, and I won't say another word about it, is the end credit scene. So make sure that you don't leave early. And not that I'm hoping for the Marvelification of Saw, but what I saw in that end credit sequence really excited me. Now, do I think they were setting it up for another sequel in between Saw X and Saw 3? Probably not, but would I be mad? No. I think I've pretty much gotten all my positives out of the way. I know I've been very repetitive, so let's get away from that and get into probably my only negative about the movie. And I think, the predictability aside, because I feel like that's kind of a neutral thing, I don't feel positive or negative about it. No, I feel positive, because as a Saw fan, it gave me what I wanted it to. But oh my god, there's a moment of this movie where my eyes almost rolled out of my head. If you are a devoted cult member, you probably also follow me on Letterboxd, and you probably saw that I was like, oh my god, I didn't know the air in Mexico was yellow. That's so crazy. Because you guys, we're still doing this. No, not we, y'all, the filmmakers, Hollywood. I can't believe we're still doing the thing where, oh, African countries, oh, Spanish speaking countries, they're dirty. We have to put a yellow filter on it so that people know that we're in Mexico. I could not believe, again, in the year of our Antichrist, 2023, this is still happening. I'm pretty sure that my jaw dropped, and they kept it up pretty much anytime they're outdoors when they're in Mexico. Pretty much the whole movie takes place in Mexico. The camera is like on a completely overexposed setting, and there's this gross yellow tint over it. And you know, it's just kind of funny because I've never seen Mexico City look like this, the way that LA has looked so many times in my short life. I just can't believe that after years of there being memes about it, you know, we make fun of Breaking Dawn Part 2 for doing the same thing when they travel to Egypt. After years of just memes on the internet, and Breaking Bad does the same thing too, right? That these filmmakers just lacked the wherewithal to think of the optics of that. I swear to God, just meeting the movie on its terms, and as a Saw fan, I thought that it was a perfect film, except for that. I could not give the movie 5 stars. I gave it 4.5, and it was because of that stupid fucking yellow tint. Because it's propaganda is what it is. It's like, okay, here's a stylistic choice to let the audience know that we are now somewhere exotic. Their main language is not English here. Oh my god. If anything, the United States is more exotic because it's so much less homogenous. But whatever. I just hope that more people are talking about that. I haven't watched any other reviews of the movie because I wanted like to have original thoughts, you know what I mean? But I hope that people are talking about that. And if they're not, then they should. We cannot. It is the 2020s. We cannot be doing this anymore. That was the only thing about the movie that really took me out, because it was just this moment where it was supposed to be really hopeful. It's really earnest. You know, John has traveled down there because he is looking to get this experimental treatment, and he steps off the plane, and it's meant to feel like this really cinematic moment where he's bright-eyed and he's kind of hopeful, and it's like, wow, I'm here now. And it's fucking yellow, dude. So yeah, that does it, I think, for all my spoiler-free thoughts on the movie. I think that's enough. I just really briefly want to touch on some spoiler elements, and it's only gonna take like a couple minutes here. I just think I would be remiss if I didn't mention these few things because they were amazing. They blew me out of my chair. So referring back to those 2 things that this movie did that I've never seen a Saw movie do before, and I just rewatched the entire franchise, so I always say, like, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. First of all, they put a child in a Saw trap. And right along with that, second of all, they put John Kramer himself into a Saw trap. I thought that that was brilliant because on the one hand, I did predict that that was part of the plan all along, because part of Jigsaw's whole thing, and I'm pretty sure what he tried to teach Hoffman or somebody, is that his traps are all about predicting human nature. They're always like 5 steps ahead. So I was like, yeah, okay, so this seems like it was part of the plan. But what was not part of the plan was the child being involved. It was supposed to be Amanda and John in the trap. And so while I was able to kind of predict part of that, I was not able to predict that this child would somehow be involved. You could kind of just get a sense because there was too much of the runtime left for there not to be like 2 more twists in the movie. So I just knew that John and Amanda being locked up were part of the plan somehow. Bringing the child in though, bold move. That is a cardinal sin of horror cinema. You do not kill children, which they didn't, of course. And it was a really happy ending for the boy. I loved that. But that was fun. And I don't know if it was a stunt double. It certainly looked like it was Tobin Bell to me. But getting waterboarded by blood, and I don't know what the fake blood was. I don't think that it was just dyed water because the consistency seemed pretty thick. If that was Tobin Bell, that's just wild. And even if it wasn't, the fact that after that he was completely covered in the fake blood, and from what I've researched so far, that is one of the most miserable things about making a Saw movie, is just being covered in blood the entire time. But that also did kind of remind me of the original. The shots during the moment where he kind of sits up out of the trap and he's covered in blood again, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm watching the original movie. The homages were so slight like that, but just everything about the atmosphere of the movie, it felt like it rang so true to not only the original, but the whole franchise. And that is the kind of fan service that I eat up because it is not so in your face. It's really, really subtle to the point where some people wouldn't even really notice, like they wouldn't even pick up on it. They would just maybe get the feeling, and that would also be enough. half. Also, I am editing. And another thing too, this is the third thing, that John Kramer himself was so involved in all the traps that he was like standing there in front of his victims and talking to them. It just, oh, it was so like personal. I loved that. I wish that we got more of that during the Saw franchise. The fact that he and Amanda both were just so interactive with the victims, it kind of harkened back a little bit to Saw 3, but even more so because Jigsaw himself was a lot more able-bodied in the moment. Oh, I had to pop in because I forgot to mention that. Going back to the predictability of it though, I mean, you know, we knew that this was some sort of bunk operation down in Mexico. We know because he goes on to pass away rather quickly in the following sequels, and we also needed a setup for some really gnarly people to be put into this trap. Also, at first, I didn't realize that the guy that had pretended to have throat surgery was a faker. I really thought that he came back all mad, like looking for her. But then during the twist, you realize that he wasn't mad, he was just like scared and like trying to find his woman. But I knew that somehow Amanda and John would be like 12 steps ahead of them, and the fact that they got trapped in that little room though, I didn't see that coming. I thought that because he said no guns allowed, that he would try to like shoot Amanda or something and it would blow up back in his face. So I did and did not see that coming, where the two evil people got trapped. I also did not foresee her surviving. That evil doctor woman ended up being the final girl. So they do leave a few loose threads open. And also the most surprising thing, because I was not expecting a post-credit scene, the fact that Hoffman comes back. Because I was like, you know what? Yeah, what happened to that guy that got the pancreatic surgery? I was like, is he dead? Is he gonna realize? Is he gonna become part of this at any point? Because he was a loose thread. And then when he popped back up in the end credits, I was like, yes. And then Hoffman was there, and that line delivery, like, of all the people that you could dupe into this, you chose John Kramer. Oh gosh, so many moments of this just as a fan fed me. I wanted to cry when Amanda is having to accept John's death and they're hugging each other and they're both crying, like, oh my god. I did tear up. I cannot believe a Saw movie made me tear up. I can't believe how much I actually do care about these characters and how wonderfully they were portrayed in this last movie. I'm so happy with it. It is, to me, the best horror movie of the year. To be fair, that's not saying too much, because the only other kind of groundbreaking horror release of the year, in my opinion, is Talk to Me. Everything else has been quite underwhelming, although I really loved Renfield, but that's not like super horror. I just don't see anything topping it for the rest of the year. And, you know, let me know how you feel. Are you a Saw fan? Are you new to the franchise? Did you love the movie? Did you not? Let me know all your thoughts and opinions down below. Now, you probably also noticed these names scrolling on screen here. These are my wonderful patrons. They keep the lights on at Haunted Hippie Studios. As a thank you to them, I do post about 4 to 6 bonus videos every single month over there, as well as all the watch-alongs that get copyrighted on YouTube. They also get to see some behind the scenes of how I make my deep dives. They will probably get some exclusive vlogs and stuff throughout the month of October. But if that's not for you, all the rest of my social media is listed down below, my Instagram, my Twitter, etc., etc. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye! God, I'm still so congested! Blah.